broadcasting on the internet airwaves from the great state of Minnesota. My name is Shaun, and you're listening to The Shaun Tabatt Show. Today, my special guest is Leif Hetland, and we're discussing his new book called The Rain, Living and Loving from a Place of Rest. Leif, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Shaun. It is good to be back again.
Well, again, I'm honored to have you on sharing with my audience. We had a time to connect earlier this year at VOA, and I was excited to see that you had a new book that was coming out, and now it is out, so that's why we are here talking today to share it with all of you listeners out there. One of the things that I think people are really going to connect with is that a lot of us are at a place in life where we're living at this frenzied pace. We're constantly working and striving, and just seems like we're stuck in this never-ending cycle, and we're always kind of restless. And one of the things you flesh out in the early part of the book is your illustration of the three chairs. And I want to make sure we start with that because I think people are really going to need to connect with that to understand where we're going to go later in the conversation. So talk to us about those three chairs and how it's such a helpful way for us to see where we've been living and also check ourselves just to make sure we're in the right place once we get a hold of that idea.
Yeah, the journey on the three chairs actually started, it's almost 18 years ago when I actually was ministering in Alabama in a large African-American church. And it was one of those moments where the presence of Jesus showed up and healings and miracles. It was just a phenomenal time. And the presence was so thick. And late that afternoon, as I left the service, there were still people everywhere, just being touched by the love of Jesus. I ended up in the car on my way home, and I can still see myself driving there. And in a moment what I didn't realize I started to think, wow, you were amazing, you were great. I didn't realize pride came in. And in the next moment, there were some other things. But just the way I was thinking, from having his presence and feeling the presence of the dove of the Holy Spirit, suddenly it lifted. Now, instead of being anointed, I felt very annoying. And I felt this, and all this pressure on instead of the pleasure that I had before. But I didn't know what happened. So I'm driving home, and by the time I get home, I'm arguing with my wife, and and I don't realize what's going on. And that night, I know I'm going to have to go and face this audience. Now they're going to call institutions. They're going to try to bring in a Down syndrome son. They're bringing in people because, wow, Jesus was here. The presence is there, and we're going to bring. And I was so crippled because I didn't realize I had moved to chair 2. So that started my own personal journey 18 years ago. It's kind of so which chair are you in right now? And then later on, my son and I were driving, and I'm in traffic. In one moment, we have this healthy conversation, and in the next moment, it's like, which chair are you in right now? Because I started to get frustrated and irritated by the driver in front of me. So that started a whole visual. If you're seeing three chairs in the front of you, one of those chairs, that's the spirit-filled life. That's when chair number 1, when I'm walking in the Spirit. If you squeeze me, what's in me comes out. Love, joy, peace. It's the fruit of the Spirit that comes out of me because I'm abiding in Him. I'm in Him and He is in me. It's this resting place. That's when I know who I am and whose I am. That's when you have an A+ on your report card before you take the exam. It's that, and a lot of us, we visit that place. Positionally speaking, we maybe know we have that place, but experientially. But then chair 2, it's not just saved like chair number 1, I'm still a believer. But in that chair, it's often rooted in fear in chair 2, while chair 1 is rooted in love. Chair 2 is what I'm doing, because if I do, then I become. That chair is always restless. And often you feel this orphan tendency where I'm living for love, while in chair number 1, I'm living from love. So that person in me, which we all can feel and experience. We can have it in our marriage where I'm in chair 2. So it just started for me to create a language. Why is it that in a moment I can see how big Goliath is in chair 2, but in chair 1 I see how big God is? So I just started, and then I see the wall in chair 3. That's the wall. So kingdom of God is chair 1. Kingdom of self, that's where self is actually in the center. or Kingdom of the World, chair 3, meaning somebody, a lost world out there. And then I realize when I'm in chair 1 and I'm looking at chair 3, I see a promise. When I'm in chair 2, I see a problem. So just even my worldview, how I see things, has to do with which chair I'm living myself out of. So if I'm seeing things the way Jesus sees things, chair 1, it looks very differently. I don't see the terrorist Saul, I see the Apostle Paul. I don't treat people based upon their history, but their destiny. Chair 1, their supernatural is natural. Chair 1, it's full of love, power, and wisdom that comes out of your life, because that's who you are and that's who He is in you. While chair 2 is what I'm doing for God. This is where my value system, everything else, and then as a result of that chair 3, if people are there, they are lost. And I believe the biggest reason people are in chair 3 is because of chair 2. And they're looking for a God that looks like Jesus. And Jesus said, if you see me, you've seen the Father. In chair 1, if you're looking at sons and daughters, people can say, I know who your Papa is. I know who your God is. I know, let me look at you. That's the reflection that a chair 1 believer will have. While in chair 2, when people are looking at us, we don't look much differently than the world. Because we're being influenced by the world, because in chair 2, you're being influenced by the world instead of influencing the world in chair 1. So that started me creating a language, and it became first one session, and people just, wow, thank you for helping me. Thank you for helping my marriage. My business has actually been a chair 2 business. Oh, wow, our church is a chair 2, and language started to be created. And then how do we live and how do we love world or chair 3 from a place of chair 1? Eventually it ended up with about 12 sessions. Then I looked at all scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, and when I had 3 chairs to look at it, it suddenly gave me language. And if you're going to have a culture, you have to have a language with that culture. So this is what it means when I say, I love you, chair 1. But if I say it from chair 2, it looks very differently. Because love has to look like something. It has to feel like something. It's not just what we say here, but when I squeeze you. So that kind of gives you just a little overview that excited me tremendously when I started to create this language, because I'm still using that language every day, and so does thousands of people around the world. And finally I decided, let me at least give a book to be able to mainly focusing on how do we not just visit chair number 1 and have visitation, but how does chair 1 become a habitation? And that's kind of pretty much what this book is all about, is as beloved sons and daughters that know who we are and whose we are. How do we live and love from that resting place? How do we live the Jesus life, and how does Jesus live His life in and through us? So wherever we are in our homes or in business, and thank God it is Monday when you're a school teacher from chair 1, how does it look like? Because it's so different when you are living from heaven towards earth, from a place of identity, intimacy, inheritance, and then you're moving into your destiny. So that's a simple 6-7 minutes overview.
Oh, that's very helpful. I'm gonna be using that constantly now as I talk to my team, as I talk with my kids. It's just such a helpful illustration, and I think even for myself, just to check myself and see what kind of chair I tend to be operating out of at any given time. Throughout the book, you ask the reader to consider some questions to kind of explore, and you just kind of gave the 4 different sections. So the first part of the book, you're focusing on identity, and you're encouraging readers to explore the question of who am I? What is, as we're trying to answer that question, what does that question of who am I look like for a person that's sitting in chairs 2 or 3 versus how does it look like for somebody who's moved into chair 1? How do those different people answer that question differently?
I think that it's, if you ask a chair 2 person, who are you? Well, I'm a pastor, I'm this, because the core value in the root of it is what I'm doing. I can be a husband, I'm a father, I'm a pastor, I'm a leader, I'm a businessman. It's based upon what they do. Because in chair 2, if you do, then you have, then you become. That's the worldview in chair 2. So a chair 2, in a sense, will get their identity based on what they do, or even the response to what other people do. So if you start to describe who you are, I am wounded, I'm this, I'm that, even if you go deeper to see what is the issue in chair 2, you're saying, because of what you did, this is how you made me feel. So we're putting blames on other people and etc. While you're looking in chair number 1, it's a very, very clear identity, because this is, who are you, Leif? Well, I'm a son. I'm a beloved son. My Papa loves me. He likes me. He delights in me. I'm a friend of God. there you will feel the answer to that is always a I am instead of I do, or because of what I do. So that's kind of the clarity of the difference between chair 1 and 2. So put it in a simple way. It is not what you do that makes you who you are. That's chair 2. Let's go over to chair 1. It is who you are that makes you do what you do. So as soon as I think, wow, Leif, you are an author, you're a speaker, you're an apostle, you are, it's stress, it's pressure. That's chair 2. But when I'm focusing, Jesus only did what he saw the Father do. He only said what the Father said. It is a resting place. My value, my identity, I'm a son. I'm a beloved son. I'm a son with a dove. I'm an anointed son. And as an anointed son, I have everything that my Papa has is already mine. It's not something I'm living towards. It's something I'm living from. That's where my resting place is. My resting place is in the finished work of Jesus. He took my F and he gave me an A+. So I can now rest in who I am because I know who I am. I know who my Father is. I know who both the Father, Son, Spirit is. I know who my family is. And in the middle of all of that, this is who I am. Now this is what I have. And then from there, then this is what I do. That's chair 1. While chair 2 is often rooted in this is what I do, then I have, then I become. And it is manifested in 2 ways, either in religion or rebellion, meaning sin issues. Those are the 2 that will be manifested if you go a little bit deeper in that question in chair 2.
Well, next let's get into the second part of the book where you look at intimacy. And there you're encouraging readers to explore the question of where am I? As you think of the 3 chairs, where do people see themselves in proximity to God? I'm going to assume that the people in chair 1 are feeling very close to God, and the people as you move through the chairs there, chair 2, chair 3, you're feeling increasingly distant. How do those different chairs see themselves in proximity to God?
Yeah, first of all, in chair 1, covenant, and I know that's a loaded word, is a key. In chair 1, I'm already married to him. In chair 1, I'm looking not just at my robe of righteousness, but I'm looking at my ring, which is the signature ring that representing my Father as a son, a beloved son. In chair 1, I'm living from a place of rest, but from a place of intimacy. I'm living in my Father's home. Like I mentioned, just Luke 15 there. But in chair 2, as I'm saying, either is the prodigal son tendency, and when the prodigal son tendency is kind of a give me, touch me, bless me, fill me, self is there. There my value system is what God is going to do for me. There my value system is for what my spouse is going to do. So what it does is and if I don't live up to it, God is turning away from me because of holiness. And then I need to do the right things to get God to turn back again to me. So in chair 2, it's actually rooted in fear. The root system is fear. And what it does something with intimacy because I cannot hear his voice. I don't see his face. I don't feel his love. I'm not experiencing his presence. And I'm not abiding in his pleasure. And then as a result, if I do this, then I will feel better. And that brings intimacy. So just using the Luke 15, the prodigal son just moved further away from love the more he did. The prodigal brother was out on the field. Look what I'm doing for God. If I do these different things, we think that's what intimacy is. While the Father is there, and for us, they're to living your life like you have a home, not just a house, but a home. You have a place of security. You have a place of love. You have a place of value. You have a place of purpose. I already have an A+. So I didn't have children based upon what they're going to do for me, but I had children to be with me. Out of that, they can do things, and so that's kind of the biggest shift in regard to the intimacy area. So in chair 1, I'm at rest. It's not always I need to feel God, because it's not even just a feeling aspect, because I can trust him. I know who he is, and I know who I am. I have a home. When I'm walking into that home, I can coming into the living room and just hang out with him. I have a resting place and a bedroom. I can go to the kitchen and I know that it is my Father's good pleasure. There is fruit that I can eat from. Love, joy, peace. And what I eat from is what I become, what I beholding I'm becoming. The refrigerator is full. I don't live from measure, I live from fullness. So when the one I am with is the one I become like. So when I'm with him, something starts to take place in me. Something starts to change just because of the relationship I have with him. And then from freely I receive, freely then I become. That's the intimacy. Now I can give it. So everything in chair 1 is about receiving. Then you're becoming what you're receiving, and then you're releasing. While often chair 2 is achieving. I'm out there trying to work myself towards a home instead of from a home. And there's all these things out there that in the next moment keeps me away. It's not that God doesn't speak, because he speaks very clearly. But in chair 2, it has to filter through all the channels that I'm listening to. And there's so much noise out there that I cannot often discern or separate what is Papa's voice, what is God's voice in the middle of it. While Jesus always was in chair 1. And there's times I go in chair 2, but I recognize that's what we're trying to help. What happened here? In a moment I was connected to him. Chair 2 is always disconnected. Chair 1 is connected. What happened here? That's what's going on. So then what I do is I turn myself towards love, because that's who God is. That's my worldview towards him. And I go right back into chair 1 so that I'm back again in a resting place where I receive, become, and then I can release it. That's the difference in regard to the intimacy. So it's a fun journey in chair 1. And yes, all of us visit chair 2, but it's just we don't have to be there for a week, because when we recognize that restlessness, that fear, or anything else, or that striving, or then I'm moving right back into intimacy with God. But also then it flows into my marriage, into my kids, into my office, into every area of my life from that place. That's chair 1.
All right. Well, next, let's get into the third part of the book. That's where you explore inheritance and have people look at that question of, what do I have? How do the different chairs see their inheritance?
Well, when it comes to in chair number 1, first of all, I am living from inheritance instead of towards inheritance. In chair number 1, I'm living from fullness. Chair 2, I'm always living from measure. And I give just a practical illustration. I remember so clearly because of some of my worldview, and part of that was connected in chair 2. Norway was occupied by Germany in World War II. And for those 5 years while we were occupied, my parents were born during Second World War. Some of the things, there was scarcity in chair 2. In a sense, the world that I grew up with, we didn't know if there was going to be food or this and that. So in the next moment, you squeeze everything out of the toothpaste because you don't know. The root is there is fear that there maybe is not toothpaste in the future. So even when you then started to have more things, it still had a root system. It's not just, okay, we need to steward things in the right way. But in the root of this is, if there's only 8 slices in a pizza, and if these people there's 8 people there, then I'm not going to get the slice. It's a worldview. While in chair 1, Papa God owns the bakery. So it's not a fear-based. There is fullness. It's not that if I receive love of somebody that there is less. It's a fullness way of thinking, living. So the inheritance, I'm a co-heir with Jesus Christ. What he paid for is available. There's a kingdom. And this kingdom continues to expand. It's endless. So there is a place of abundance, because God is abundant God. It's not just measure. It's not just feeding the multitudes, but there's 12 baskets left over. It's a way of thinking, living, and loving from inheritance, chair 1, instead of towards its chair 2. Chair 1 is a love base. So there's all these things that is available to sons and daughters on a daily basis. So when I'm in chair number 1, I understand sometimes that God doesn't give me all of those things in chair 1, because if I had 1 talent and I buried it down, he's not going to give me 2, and etc. So part of that is also learning then, and the other element, it's like I wouldn't have given my daughter a expensive, nice car, even if she wanted that when she was 15, because she didn't have the maturity to be able to handle it. So it's not that we do not have all the different things in the family account that is available from the Father. But the Father also, if he sees that some of these blessings takes us away from him as a blesser, that comes into, he's not going to get to us more than what he gets through us in regard to the freedom. So in that sense, that's why we're growing into maturity in chair number 1. So you're growing into maturity. But chair 2 is a little bit different. Often it can also be rooted in entitlement as one of the warning signs in regard to inheritance. And that was kind of the prodigal son. He did not really want the wealth. He says, give me, give me. So what he took some of the resources of the Father. I have certain things that you owe me, Dad. And as a result of that, he squandered it. And we see that many, many different times when we do not know how to honor and love in the right way. So in the next moment, there's all these things that is available to us. And we see how Papa is even generous enough to give it to us, but we end up in chair 2 with it. If our root issue is not to be rooted and grounded in love, then we do not represent him, because God is love, 1 John 4:16. So the difference is you're a co-heir with Christ. He already paid for it all. Everything that is needed in every area, he says, I am. I am, and that's a covenant name. I am your healer. I am your provider. I am your sufficiency. I am your strength. I am your joy. There's fullness of joy. There's fullness of peace. There's fullness of everything that is available for sons and daughters. Now it is more the growth and the maturity, and that's part of the discipleship process, to growing into maturity as sons and daughters. So we become friends of God, and we can be entrusted with the things of God and then live from that place. But I'm not going into the account where, wow, I need to do this to have to become. I already see the fullness is available. Now I'm learning how can I grow more in wisdom, because he is the wisdom. I already have. He is the fullness of wisdom is in me. But now what's there in the account, I'm learning how to be able to steward so I can handle more and more of his wisdom, of his power, of his love, and everything that is available. That's chair 1. While chair 2, you're often trying to perform forward. And eventually it is when you die that most of these promises in the Word of God is going to happen, instead of when you get connected to Jesus and you get the spirit of adoption and you have the ring on your finger, chair 1, where Papa says, all that I have is yours.
Well, let's transition to the final part of the book. The last part of the book, you look at destiny, and you're encouraging people to look at the question of, what am I called to do? How does our perspective on our destiny, our calling, look from the different chairs?
Yeah, I think that the biggest difference, and I'll give you a practical example. One of my old-time friends, he operated from chair 2. He felt he was called to go into ministry and felt called to be a pastor and called, but he ran a car wash, cleaning cars. That's what his business does. So when he wake up in the morning, wow, he just missed Sunday. He missed church because so Monday through Friday, it was very difficult. It was very hard work. And usually when I got my car clean, I asked him, I said, hey, how are you doing, Josh? And he said, he just said, I look forward to, I'm supposed to go to Bible college, and I know I'm called to pastor, but right now I just do whatever I can to save up money and running this business. When he suddenly got the revelation of the chairs, something shifted in him, because suddenly he realizing, and this is what I went to him one day, I said, let me pray for you and let me ordain you right now. You don't have to go to Bible college or anything else, because you are actually a pastor. I saw how he pastored his employees. I saw how he pastored the atmosphere, and he had more customer, meaning people getting saved, than if he was in a church of 200 people or 300 people. But again, now he moved into chair 1, and now for him is, thank God it is Monday. He will walk into that workplace. He will start to see his management. He will see each person the way that God sees them, thinking about it. And then he realizing that he is a pastor in the marketplace. And then when he coming to Sunday, he's sharing with the rest of the people, receiving and just experiencing the fullness so that he can live and love according to his calling. The same with a school teacher. Thank God it is Monday. Going into that classroom setting from a chair 1, representing as a beloved son and daughter how good Papa God is and how loved each one of the students are. And throughout the week, so when you know your uniqueness and your calling, it's not so much about what I do. If I'm a school teacher, no, it's more who I am, and I get to represent my Father wherever I'm at in chair number 1. While chair 2 is a very, very different worldview. It's a different way of thinking about it, and even what is my calling, because there's so much focus again what I'm going to do. And then, because if I do that, then I have, and then I become. So I just use that as a couple of practical illustration, that it doesn't matter so much if you are going to be a school teacher or a nurse or some of those different things. You're going to represent heaven from a chair 1, no matter where you're at. So for me, it's not so much, I'm going to the office today, and now while I'm in the office. No, I do everything as unto the Lord. While I'm in the office, I represent my father here in the office as a beloved son. I already have an A+. I treat everybody the way he treats them. I see each one of them as very valuable people because that's how Papa sees me. And then in the next moment, I do not just see people the way they are, but the way they're going to be. I have a spirit of excellence upon me. Each one of the people that are around there, I'm keeping my love on. There's nothing they can do to keep me from loving them. I take responsibility because I'm rooted and grounded in love. Or if you're a school teacher, right now somebody's cleaning my car. How does generosity look like for that person? It's not just what he's cleaning my car, but in the next moment I will bless that person. What does the goodness and kindness of my Papa look for him? Last night in a restaurant when I was there. I was not called. I was just going there to eat. But there was a couple there because, again, I represent my father. Now, hearing what the father is saying, and there's somebody in the back room. I went in there, ministered to that person, and that sounds strange. But he had some health issues. Then the lady that was there, that was just last night, because everywhere I go, love looks like something. And at that moment was generosity. Take care of that bill. That's not my primary calling in the airplane or on my way home from Casper. Everywhere I go, I get to represent my father. And for a moment, that can be in a conference, but then it is in my home, or that can be in my office, or while they're cleaning my car. It doesn't matter where I am or what I do in that moment. Finding out what your calling is in regard to, first of all, from an identity, this is who I am, I represent. Now, the intimacy I have with God put me also into me, seeing into me, and the way I look at each person from that place. Then from that, in everything that is needed out in that world, what is available, and then the destiny. And there's also some tools in the book that can help people. What is that looking like in regard to the practical, from identity, intimacy, and now everything is available. Now, if that is as a school teacher or as a computer programmer and everything else, how does that look like? With all of heaven's resources available, with a fullness of love in me, fullness of power, fullness of wisdom, how does that look like on a daily basis in the different area and the sphere? If you're in school or moving towards certain area, you're going to represent God in that area. He maybe change the direction, but all you need to do is what you see him do. You're saying what he says, and from that identity, intimacy, inheritance, you're stepping into what is your color, your uniqueness. So the administrator in my office, she administrates as a daughter of Papa God, and she administrates with all of the wisdom that is needed, with the spirit of excellence. That's the Chair One lifestyle, and it is a lot of fun.
Well, those are some great examples. Thank you so much for sharing those. One of the fun things that you have to support this book is you also have an e-course available to a company called Terrain. Tell us a bit about that. I know your ministry has been expanding your online presence, and you have a learning platform that you're working on. So tell us a bit about this e-course.
Yeah, and people can go online on calltorainbook.com, calltorainbook.com, and they can get a free e-course. Sometimes when you read a book directly, what's happening is, again, the lenses. If you are in chair 2, you will read this book. And sometimes also deception is very deceiving. So what I realized was, let me take some time and look at identity and take some time to share what does this really mean. Similar like our conversation. But if they can capture visualization, seeing and hearing and feeling and saying, this is really what it means, and we clarify. I just saw it was an incredible increase for the people who were reading the book. So I will spend, there's 4 lessons that I do. 1 on the identity, 1 on intimacy, 1 on inheritance, and 1 on destiny. And that's free. But what it does, it just enhances, because the glasses you have on then when you start to read a book, you're just able to get the nutrients out of it on a whole different level by taking that free e-course. So I encourage, because we're hearing people now, I read the book, but then after the e-course I went back and read the book, and now it just have a totally different meaning and feeling. So there I didn't want just people when they seeing the words of the book, which is my words, but you also capturing the author, the person behind that book, and my process and feeling it. It just gives a totally different value. Instead of me reading about Jennifer, it's actually spending time with Jennifer on a different level. That's my wife. And I can describe what we have together on a different level. And that's part of why I encourage people to even just go and get that, even before you get the book. Perhaps you can listen to some of that, watch some of that, calltorainbook.com. And it is going to give you an upgrade. And that's what my heart is here. And I'm already hearing stories all over the place. At the Voice of the Apostle this year, one person just came and broke down and just wept and wept. And all these years, the book was not even hardly out yet. It had taken but just an hour, started to read, and the life was transformed. And the stories that are coming in is just phenomenal. When people are just finding, I don't have to be just in chair number 2, or I don't have to live there any longer. I get to come home and finding that rest. And from rest, you will wear the enemy out. Rest becomes your weapon of warfare. And the enemy is so nervous when sons and daughters are stepping into the hard work of rest. And this is the beauty of it. So I encourage people to just get that free. And then we have the online platform where every week, bringing in Heidi Baker, Sean Bowles, and many of our friends that you at Chosen have as authors, Danny Silk, and other one, I'm bringing them an interview and helping them from chair 1, from this place of identity, and interviewing the best people. Then I want people on a weekly basis to have access to me, and the second of all, access to the friends of mine that has become this message in the area of power, love, wisdom from a chair 1. And that's going to be released in January, so just check out that convergencetv.com and just follow us here, and then you will capture every single day. We will give you practical, tangible tool how you can live the Jesus lifestyle wherever you are at.
Well, and as we do with every interview, we'll be sure to include links in the show notes for this episode, places where you can buy this new book, places where you can connect with Leif and his ministry. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Leif Hetland. Once again, our book today was Called to Reign, Living and Loving from a Place of Rest. You can find out more about Leif, this great book, and the related eCourse on his website at calltorainbook.com. And Leif, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It has been a great pleasure speaking with you again.
Same with you.
And that's all for this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can connect with me via email using show@shauntabatt.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, where I go by the Twitter handle @stabatt. And if you enjoy the show, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Until next time, this is your host, Shaun Tabatt, signing off.